last video on what we're seeing in 2020, we wanted to take a look at the broader commercial ecosystem. So what do we see happen in terms of sales technology, in terms of marketing, enablement, and in general, how companies are supporting individual sellers. In terms of the sales technology, what we've seen is that, well, video has won for one thing. At this point, there's no debate about whether or not video is the most effective way to engage customers or not. I think it was virtually 100% of people told us that video is the most engaging platform. But more important than that is that we see that customer interactions are now more and more reliant on a deep tech stack that gets the seller to the moment where they can actually have a deep, insightful conversation with a buyer. That tech stack starts with customer information to make sure that you identify who the best likely buyers are. That information is processed by marketing, by sales enablement, and goes into sales enablement platforms and sales outreach platforms to create outreach cadences aimed at different buyers and stakeholders, so that you can nurture them along the right journey. And this trend, we think, will have no reversion. At the point at which selling becomes dependent on and enabled by technology, this arms race will only gather speed. An advantage will accrue to sellers who are just that little bit ahead of making better use of some of the technologies that are available to them. At the same time, as sales becomes more dependent on technology, so does marketing. And maybe some of the largest changes will actually come in terms of how marketers now go out to customers. Because interestingly, when we ask customers how they make decisions, what we find is that the order hasn't really changed. Senior executives still look to their peers. After that, they look to trusted third parties, they look to their direct reports, and then they look to their own research to make decisions. The seller, they look to last. And so what that means is that marketing can now no longer rely on trying to bring people together to make that executive-to-executive conversation to serve as a reference. And large online meetings and events, as we've all experienced, are hard to pull off. The alternative, we think, is both better and probably more expert content that tries to get closer into some of the hard questions buyers have about what we're selling. Where previously you would have relied on trying to bring people together in a room to answer some of those questions, now that everybody's doing everything virtually, you're more reliant on them finding you online and being able to answer some of those questions first. That puts much greater emphasis on content and greater emphasis on making sure that people find you where they look for information. And all of this means that team selling is likely here to stay. As we touched on earlier, what we've observed is that a sale now takes many more interactions to happen. And that means that you're likely going to have to bring more support to bear at the same time. And that starts to blur the lines between marketing, between SDRs, between classic sales enablement, as well as sales. The salesperson, we think, will still serve as the orchestrator of all of this motion, but they both need more support and they need more different in kind support in order to succeed in front of a buyer who's become much more demanding than they used to. So the future obviously isn't entirely unknown, isn't entirely known, but it seems safe to conclude that a lot of the technology is here to stay. And it also seems safe to conclude that the commercial ecosystem is no longer as obvious as it used to be. It might no longer be as easy to refine individual sales roles very precisely. Realistically, people are going to be asked to lean in a lot more, and there's going to be a lot more asked from people such as sales support, customer success, sales engineering, who might have previously been able to act in a more hands-off fashion. As we look to close out 2020, we'll be staying on top of all of these changes and look forward to reporting out how we see things change.